All right, everyone. Welcome back to California Ocean Science Trust's 2026 Sea Change Scholars webinar series called Navigating Your Future: Careers at the Ocean and Coastal Science Policy Nexus. You already know me, you've seen my face a lot, but I'll reintroduce myself briefly. My name is Heidi Waite. I'm a science officer at the Ocean Science Trust, or OST for short. Our mission at OST is to strengthen the connection between scientific research and sound ocean management. And part of meeting that goal is to make investments to support graduate students in graduate education and ultimately just California's science capacity. So this webinar series fits within that work to give graduate students just a window into the real world ocean and coastal related careers at that science policy nexus in California. And if you haven't seen already, we also have developed these companion journals for the series to help you reflect on your career interests and to help you sort of reflect on each webinar as well. The journals and recordings of previous panel discussions, as well as a 30-minute overview of the California state entities at this Science Policy Nexus, are found on our webinar website page, which was just linked in the chat for you. As before, I also wanted to briefly mention that as you leave the Zoom, no matter what time you leave, there will be a quick 4-question survey that'll pop up. We'd love for you to fill that out. It really helps us get to hear from you and to get feedback and improve the webinar series as a whole. We will be having these webinar series through the rest of the summer and the fall, so we hope you will continue to engage and come see and hear from the folks that we have as panelists from all sorts of California state entities in the coast and ocean space. Today, we're super excited to have staff from the California State Coastal Conservancy. I will give a brief overview of their vision, but one of the panelists will give a more in-depth sort of overview of what the group does as a whole. But generally, their vision really is to have beautiful, restored, and accessible coasts for current and future Californians. The Conservancy acts with others to protect and restore and increase public access to California's coasts, oceans, coastal watersheds, and the San Francisco Bay Area. We're going to start with some introductions as per usual, and then we're going to dig into questions that you asked via the registration process, but also really encourage you all to submit any questions you have today via the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Send those in at any point during today's discussion, even during introductions. So with that, with logistics out of the way there, I would love to start introducing some panelists. So one at a time, I'll have them turn on the camera and give our brief introduction. We'll start with Evyan. If you're up first, if you'd be willing to sort of give a quick introduction, name, pronouns, and job title. We'll get into the details of job titles in a moment, or in what you actually do in a moment, but would love for you to also give us sort of a high-level overview of the mission and the role of the Coastal Conservancy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heidi. And hi, everyone. I'm Evyan Sloane. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer at the California State Coastal Conservancy. Heidi provided our mission at the Conservancy. So we work with others to restore, protect, and expand access to the coast and provide climate resilience to the coast. We lead projects, but we're also a funding agency, so provide grants for others to do the types of priorities laid out in our strategic plan with our support. The types of projects we do coastal ecosystem restoration, climate resilience, which includes wildfire, which sometimes is surprising to hear that the Coastal Conservancy has a wildfire resilience program. We do land acquisitions, which include tribal land backs. We do trails and public access amenities. We do lower coastal overnight accommodation projects or lower cost coastal accommodation projects. So building campgrounds that are low cost or hostels that are low cost along the coast. And then we have a few equity programs that really focus on telling untold stories along the coast, as well as getting systematically excluded communities to the coast for joyful experiences. We act as a thought leader in testing and advancing nature-based adaptation to really mitigate the impacts of climate change across the state. Sometimes we're the first funder and or leader of a nature-based adaptation project that's designing, testing, implementing projects like living shorelines that restore estuarine habitats, but also protect the shoreline from the impact of sea level rise. So we have a whole diversity of the types of projects that we work with others on to really try to restore, protect, and expand access to the California coast.
Amazing. And I'm excited to dig into a couple of those topics through hearing about the work that each of the panelists do. So with that, I'd love to then invite our next panelist, Thomas, to join us to do a quick name, pronouns, and current title kind of introduction before we dig into your work later on.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Thomas Morales. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a member of the Tomoke Tribe of Western Shoshone, and my job title is the statewide tribal liaison and environmental justice analyst with the State Coastal Conservancy.
Amazing. Very excited to hear a little bit more about your work for sure. Great. Well, Vanessa, I would love to ask you to join us next and give your introduction.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you all. My name is Vanessa Aczon. My pronouns are she, her, and my job title is Project Development Analyst 2.
Great. And Sally, last but not least, please come join us.
Hi everyone, my name is Sally G. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am a project development specialist.
Amazing. Thank you all for quick introductions. I would love to then now dig into a little bit about how you got to where you are currently in your current position. So would love to hear a little bit from folks on that either potentially career transition for some of you and others sort of the progression to your current role. So I think I'll start with Evyan again, if you wouldn't mind talking us through how long you've been in your current position and how you got there.
Yeah, no problem. So I've been at the Coastal Conservancy for 12 years, and I've been in my current position as Deputy Executive Officer more than a year and a half. It will be 2 years in October. And over this 12-year period, I've worked in 3 different departments at the Coastal Conservancy. I've been in our South Coast program, our San Francisco Bay program, and now in this statewide position. In the Southern California program, I was really focused on coordinating between all the state and federal agencies working on wetland restoration across the Southern California Bight. I also was working on novel nature-based adaptation pilot projects and really trying to demonstrate how we can use nature to protect our shorelines and coasts from sea level rise. In San Francisco Bay, so in the South Coast, I was a project manager. In San Francisco Bay, I moved to be a deputy program manager and was helping supervise other project managers, but then also really trying to drive some of our program priorities forward. And one thing I focused on was sediment related work. So really trying to figure out how, as a region, we could beneficially reuse dredged material from San Francisco Bay, as well as excavated soil from around the uplands of San Francisco Bay, and how we can use that sediment and soil and shoreline adaptation and wetland restoration projects. In terms of getting to the Conservancy, I've had a very straightforward path in my career, but I have tried a few different jobs within the environmental field. So after finishing my undergraduate degree in environmental science at the University of San Francisco, I became a research technician with 2 different professors, one at University of San Francisco and another at San Francisco State. So splitting my time between the 2 universities, but collaborating on the same suite of projects, studying the impacts of climate change on tidal wetlands throughout the San Francisco Bay and Delta. And then I went to grad school at the Estuary and Ocean Science Center, which many of you are probably aware of. It's the marine biology field campus of San Francisco State. And I studied climate change impacts on submerged aquatic vegetation in Sassoon Bay in the Western Delta with Dr. Catherine Boyer. Following grad school, I worked with the San Francisco Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve as a technician again, studying sediment dynamics in tidal wetlands, and then became a California Sea Grant Fellow with the Coastal Conservancy. After my fellowship at the Conservancy, I did briefly leave the Conservancy for 3 months to try private consulting, which wasn't for me, although the firm I worked for was really fantastic. And I'm happy to share details about that. But after those 3 months, I went back to the Conservancy into the South Coast program.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely want to dig into some of the consulting. Something we don't have as many panelists have that experience, but wanted to briefly ask you if you, in that transition to more research and technician potentially to this more policy, science policy position, and I know that we have a lot of grad students in the audience that are potentially more on the research side and not in the policy. So I don't know if you have any advice or thoughts, and we can continue to explore this throughout the webinar, but any initial thoughts or skills that you would recommend cultivating as a grad student that helped in that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest leap was like instead of being the person doing the science, you are now convening and coordinating and synthesizing the science to make management decisions, to make decisions on what projects to fund. So, even though it doesn't sound very exciting, I think that getting some meeting facilitation and coordination experience is super helpful to make that leap. Because again, I was really lucky when I moved into the Coastal Conservancy. I had this coordination role with scientists and agencies and nonprofits to try to advance and scale up wetland restoration across the Bight. And I was able to really develop this science advisory panel and think about the research I already knew on wetland restoration throughout the state, calling up on my old coworkers and professors and advisors and bringing them together with their professional connections to really try to set out some science-based restoration goals for the Coastal Conservancy. So there was a real direct link into my academic work, but again, it was more of a convener synthesizer.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are two definitely skills that you can, as a grad student, start working on, even if it is through things like clubs or other kind of activities as well, even if you don't get the chance through research. But definitely recommend learning to translate your science and to convene groups of folks. Great. We'll dig in a little bit more on some of that other background in a moment, but I would love to pass it to Thomas to give us a little bit of background and how you got to where you are, and if you have any thoughts on a similar strain of thinking of any advice or skills in that transition from your background into more policy potentially.
Yeah, so I've been in my position currently for 4 months, which is fairly fresh. And so just a bit about the journey to get there. I received my bachelor's of science in environmental science at San Diego State in 2020. And then I received my master's of science in the School of Public Health with a concentration in environmental health in 2024. And I studied the effects of solar irradiation on secondary wastewater effluent from North County, San Diego, identifying which chemicals were removed, persistent, or transformed after 12 hours of solar irradiation in the lab. And after receiving my MS, I asked my PI if we could investigate California halibut for DDT, Dr. Una Ho at San Diego State. And her lab had previously investigated humpback whales, bottlenose dolphins, California condors for this legacy insecticide. And so we got funding to analyze halibut, and I got to collect the halibut, bring them to the lab, and kind of dive into that research more. And there was a defining moment in my career as a 2025 Sea Grant Fellow. I worked with the State Coastal Conservancy in the South Coast. I spent my time learning about the Conservancy and its many programs, grant selection and management, and I was specifically interested in tribally related work at the Conservancy. And in terms of that transition period, I feel like I leaned on clear communication and time management skills gained in the lab, and apply those at the Conservancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of transferable skills that as a grad student you don't realize you have, but time management and some of the other skills you mentioned there are super key. So thank you for some of that reflection. I also wanted to mention in the chat we just linked the California Sea Grant fellowships that both Evan and Thomas have mentioned. So check those out if you're interested. Um, I would love to then hear from let's see, Sally, if you wouldn't mind joining us too, because I think you have somewhat of a research background too, and how you transition into your current role and where you're at in your career as well. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I've been in my current role at the State Coastal Conservancy for about 3 years, but I have been in the public sector for over 8 years now, and was previously at another state conservancy based in Los Angeles before I transitioned over to the State Coastal Conservancy. For me, have I got my bachelor's in ecology, and after I graduated from college, and I worked as a field technician in a lab for a couple years. And then I decided that while I liked science, I didn't like actually doing the science, and it just wasn't for me. So then I was really trying to look for a way to still apply my science background. Um, and at that time, I had also participated in a program that a nonprofit was leading in Los Angeles. And they were basically developing leaders to participate in more environmental advocacy and just being more civically engaged in the community. And so at that time, I just happened to come across a job posting for our local state conservancy here in Los Angeles. And um, they hired me because I had a science background and able to apply that knowledge into reviewing like grant applications and managing conservation projects that will be looking to fund with public funding. And so, yeah, have been doing that for a couple of years now and really, applying my knowledge as a kind of generalist scientist, I'd say, to evaluate projects and develop really kind of develop projects that have a public benefit.
Amazing. I'm excited to dig into a little bit more of that sort of grant admin side that I don't think we've had a panelist yet, so stay tuned. Let me then bring up Vanessa next. I'd love to hear about your background. I know that you probably have had one of the biggest sort of shifts in your career, so would love to hear about how you got to your position, and then just if there was, what is that pathway that brought you to the Conservancy, given your public health background, and if there was, what kind of things you did deliberately or not to make that transition.
Yeah. So as mentioned, so my background is in public health, but really starting off, so really a windy plot twist path I took. So I really started with like my background in really wanting to go into nursing and direct patient care, which I did in terms of health sciences and doing social services to folks. So really interested in providing that individual care, and then wanted to transition more into that public health route. And that's where I worked with a lot of like veterans and older adults and the community mental health space. So looking at the root causes overall, how can I address those? And then it really leaped on over to the environmental aspect. So I would say during my graduate program, I was able to attend one or take an environmental health class. So it provided a broader perspective on how just everything's just interconnected even more so. So after my grad program, during my grad program, my fieldwork was at Hope Collaborative. It's Health for Oakland's People and Environment. So really looking at food systems and the built environment. And so even more so kind of delving more into that aspect, really wanted me to see how can I get into that realm of the environment and then in that area. So after the grad program, I was continuing on with the community mental health. And then it was during the pandemic time where it's like, maybe I need to like look into my interest of the environmental aspect and how can I do that? And so fortunately, I saw an opening as well at the Conservancy, and that opening was at a staff services analyst position, so more entry level. So it allows folks to have that opportunity who may not have that background in coastal protection and environmental science to be able to make that transition as well. So starting in that level and then continue onward into like different like titles. So project development analyst 1, project development analyst 2, which is my current role. And then it goes into that specialist role. That's where Sally is in. So, and then with each level, there's learning more of gaining more experience and knowledge and just taking on more complexities of the different types of projects. So I've been in this role for 7 months, but been at the Conservancy for 4 years now. And it's been great learning a lot of new things, especially in the beginning. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great for graduate students in the audience to hear about these transitions, that they are possible. If your interests change over time, you can transition into different types of careers. Did you have any reflections? And I'd love to bring in Thomas on this as well, given your sort of public health background, to speak on if there's any skill, like public health specific skills that are useful that you turned out to be useful in your current roles, or if there's anything about that transition that you'd want to say.
I think what Evan had mentioned about like the facilitation and collaboration, that is a lot in terms of in public health. You're always needing different disciplines in the room to be able to, address a certain public health issue. And then I think about just having a system lens thinking and equity focused. And so that's the type of work that we do. So that was helpful to bring into this work, and it's very transferable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, Thomas, if you have anything you want to add to that reflection of any public health specific skills that you now use, or if there's anything else about that transition you wanted to share.
Yeah, I guess throughout the DDT research with California halibut, one of the purposes of the research was to identify if there is DDT in these California halibut, but also share with the local tribal community about the presence of halibut and safe serving sizes. And so that I had a chance to present multiple times at San Diego State's like an indigenous focused conference. And so that just gave me some skills on how to share with community and like learn that process. And now it's in my current role, there's a lot more community engagement. So that transferred well.
That's great. Yeah. So community engagement for that kind of work is important. Sally, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what your role actually entails in that grant admin kind of role. What do you look for in those grant proposals, and how does having that ecology, you touched on it already a little bit, but how does having that ecology or research background help you do that role essentially? So a little bit about the role and a little bit more specifically on that grant admin side that we haven't had panelists for to talk about.
Yeah, totally. So we get to be involved in some really, really cool projects. Like in our roles as project managers, we end up managing millions of dollars in state funding for public projects and through grants and contracts. So we do review a lot of applications, and part of what we look for are multi-benefit projects that not only benefit ecosystems, but also like people and how that balances with public access. And so there's always weighing like habitat restoration and public access, and then equity also plays a large role into kind of how we as an agency evaluate our proposals as well. So we'll end up looking for partners, who you're working with and how you're collaborating with others in your projects. And so, from a science background, I think it's really helpful to know, like, be able to ask questions on whether the reasoning in the grant proposal makes sense, or the claims that the grant application is saying they'll be completing or supporting, is there backup to back up those claims, and does that make sense? And so does it align with the purposes of our funding and what we've seen in past projects? Does it align with the science we've been seeing? So I definitely think that our science background really helps with kind of asking those questions, always being curious, and like, yeah, I think it also helps that you don't have to argue with us to know that the environment is worth protecting. And so that's also, I think, really helpful to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind me digging a little bit more on your role itself, it sounds like some of your role or some of your day-to-day might be reviewing applications, but what else is involved? It sounded like you do some project management too. So could you give us a glimpse into the day-to-day, which might vary, but just some sense for students to understand what your role really means?
Yeah. So I would say that a lot of my day to day are project management related tasks. So a lot of emails, coordinating meetings, participating in like advisory committees and driving um, kind of the direction of some of our projects. And so then in my role as a specialist, I feel like I'm really lucky because I get to be really involved in some wetland restoration projects and really driving like the decisions in terms of how we approach the restoration, what kind of experts and advisors we need to be participating in some type of advisory committee to advise us. Because I'm more of a generalist, and so I know some things about a lot of things and not everything about specific birds or wetland species. And so, yeah, a lot of it is synthesizing and gathering people to come together and give us some advice.
Great. Yeah, thanks for a little bit more detail on your role. I'd love to hear a little bit more. Evan, you mentioned that a little bit about your role. You sort of gave that summary, but if there's anything else you wanted to tell us to give us a glimpse into that day-to-day activity. And then I'm also curious as a secondary question about how science plays a role in the policy and management side of your work. Just to give early career scientist graduate students a sense of what the process is to get science into, change into management practices, etc.
Sure. So to start with my specific role now, so at a high level, I supervise the regional managers. So our agency is broken down into 4 regions: North Coast, San Francisco Bay, Central Coast, and South Coast. So helping regional managers make high level decisions for their regions, as well as a big part of my job is managing our budget um, for projects. So working with the legislative process, tracking the budget as it goes through the state budget process. And also, I often represent our agency at a variety of venues. But one thing I'm really focused on is trying to reduce barriers for our grantees to access our funding, as well that in turn will help increase equitable access. So lots of different types of communities, and especially systematically excluded communities, accessing our funding. So I have a subcommittee of people where we're working to really think about what are our grant making processes and how can we simplify them? How can we share the information of how to get our funding more broadly? So that is a focus I've been working on for the past few years. Day to day, I often am answering questions from our various control agencies or the legislature. So I can sort of be this point of contact for our agency when, we're a part of the California Natural Resources Agency. So sometimes there's questions from them about our projects. Sometimes there's questions from the Department of Finance, who manages all of the money for the state, about what percentage of our funding is going to this type of project, or how many federal grants do we have right now. So there's lots of questions that can come from these sort of control agencies, and I am the person who has to really work quick on my feet, try to figure out all this information internally, and then present it in a way that makes sense to folks. But probably one of my favorite tasks that I've been working on in my current role that I touched on a bit is working with the regional managers to make challenging funding decisions for new, untested approaches to coastal resilience. And so, an example of that is on the outer coast, many of our beaches and shorelines are experiencing really high rates of erosion due to storm events and sea level rise. And in California, we have really high energy systems, and there's just so few nature-based approaches that you can really do. We've been piloting a lot of projects where we're trying to demonstrate like you can move infrastructure, you can restore coastal ecosystems. That's the most resilient way to do it. But there are a lot of constrained systems where you can't do that, and it's not feasible. So currently, there's a lot of artificial reef projects proposals coming to us, and it's been really interesting to me to be able to tap into the scientific research around artificial reefs and tapping into the experts that I know, the scientists working on the outer coast, and get their thoughts about these types of projects and joining meetings to understand kind of the state of the science around this topic. So that's been a fun part of my job recently. And then to answer your question about how we use scientific findings in management actions, I'll just say that we have always made science-based decisions for our restoration projects. And one way we do that for restoration, whether that's nature-based adaptation with climate change or just like old school restoration, is we usually start at a pilot scale, right? And so starting to do your projects at a smaller scale and embedding scientific research questions within the design so that we can, as we implement those pilots, get the information we need to build the scale over time and incorporate the lessons learned from the previous projects. So an example of that is we've been trying to build living shorelines across San Francisco Bay and other estuaries in California, like San Diego Bay and Upper Newport Bay in Southern California, where we're restoring native oysters and eelgrass together. And one project in San Francisco Bay really over time learned that, okay, there's a specific orientation that you need to place different reef elements and eelgrass transplants that really benefit each other. And that really is having the oyster reefs in front of the eelgrass so they act as this wave attenuation barrier, and then the eelgrass can really thrive behind it. And that took a few, studies to really figure that out. And now we're scaling that up, incorporating that lesson into our larger living shoreline projects in San Francisco Bay.
Amazing. That's so interesting. It's very cool about the Coastal Conservancy that even if you might be slightly removed from actually, putting on your grunions and going out and doing the research yourself, but you still have such a strong foothold in the science community by both, it sounds like through some of the rest of your works too, engaging with the scientific community, but also then thinking about the implementation and the actual project management side of things. I think that's very exciting. So for folks that are interested in that kind of positionality, this might be a group to look at. I would love, Vanessa, if you wanted to add anything also, I know you gave your overview of what your position is, but anything you want to add to that day-to-day to give us a glimpse into what it means to be Vanessa at work. And if there's anything else you wanted to talk about on the public health background, I'm just curious also if there's anything in the ocean science field that you had to sort of backfill. Is there anything you had to learn on the job to get up to speed, basically?
Yeah. So what it is to be Vanessa at the Conservancy. Well, typically, so similar. There's some similar tasks in terms of, managing grants, reviewing and approving like invoices, ensuring like compliance to our funding requirements, getting to evaluate different types of projects, which is really, really fun. I get to do that. I'm more of, I would say, like a generalist. I guess project manager, in terms of I get to look at projects like wildfire resilience type of projects, manage those, wetland restoration, public access, and like wetland restoration and living shorelines. So all over getting to like different components, which is really helpful. I kind of going into that question of being able to backfill. So all these different elements that I get to learn. Um, and then also, I'm part of different external and internal committees, and that has been really helpful in also understanding grant management processes. And so, in terms of there's a grant program, there's Explore the Coast that I'm helping plan and implement. And so, Explore the Coast, that's one of the Coastal Conservancy's initiatives that helps to provide like coastal experiences for communities who have historically not been able to enjoy and access the coast. And so I think when I first started, I was able to really get into Explore the Coast, and I saw that as a nexus really from like public health and that public health and into that environmental realm, really allowing folks to enjoy these outdoor spaces. And then kind of going back into the backfilling, definitely had to do that a bit. Really getting to, there's a lot of resources at the Conservancy, a lot of trainings. I really appreciate also my colleagues who are willing and open to share their knowledge. And then also, I did take a class, a community college class, and just an intro to ecology. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Just to get really that foundation. But then also getting into workshops, going to different workshops, and just really learning just the different, just yeah, there's so much to learn, and I never knew that it's so wide, it's such a breadth of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such a nexus, like you said, with public health, but some foundational information it might be useful to go back and learn, or to learn on as you go, which I think is another skill probably across the board with science policy. You are
Yeah,
generally a generalist, so you have to get up to speed quickly on certain topics. So that is a skill to learn and to practice. Great. Well, I'd love to pass it to Thomas and to get a little bit more in-depth explanation of your current role. And I know that you work on environmental justice issues, and there's been some interest in that as well. And serving as this tribal liaison, how much direct community engagement do you get? How did you get that training? I know as a member of a tribe that might be a little bit different, but there's been some curiosity around how you get that community engagement experience, or if there's academic kind of training that's useful there too. So just any suggestions or thoughts you have around building skills and experiences for folks that would be interested in working on environmental justice issues in the future.
Yeah, I'd say one of my main tasks at the Conservancy is to co-lead tribal consultation meetings with our regional liaisons and with tribes that are interested in our projects or the grantees themselves. And we also have our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion internal subcommittee that has many subcommittees within it. And I'd say that I guess for people that haven't had the chance to gain the skill sets of community engagement, and I think it really is about developing a relationship, and relationships take time, and building trust doesn't happen over the first meeting. So I think I'm 4 months into this role, but I can see that it's likely a long-term game with community engagement. And yeah, I guess just to talk about that transition a little bit more. For me, the transition required me stepping out of the lab and technical work. I usually worked alone in the lab, was self-paced, and I just had to practice my communication skills, learn about my agency's structure and policies, and to work on a larger team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I see that we have a question in the Q&A, so I want to make sure that we get to that question. So bumping up a question about sort of applications and applying to state positions. So the question is, do you have any application tips for new state candidates currently this person works, Kaylin, I think works at Great Lakes State Coastal Management Program, so have, the relevant experience, but eager to move to California and interested in the Coastal Conservancy, young professional, a year out of grad school, interested to know because I know that application process can be a little bit crazy, a little bit unique to the state. So any tips around that? I will just mention that we'll probably post in the chat here a link to a previous webinar where we went really in depth on some of the nitty-gritty about state applications. So definitely check that out. We'll refer you there. But would love to hear from this panel their own thoughts and ideas here. And yeah, I see Evan, you unmuted, so I'll pass it to you to see if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that OST is compiling resources because it's really true. The state process to apply to become a state employee is not the most straightforward process. And one thing I will just mention is, the Coastal Conservancy is part of the California Natural Resources Agency, and CNRA just started a career center, and they have a really great suite of staff from a lot of CNRA agencies who support people who are trying to transition into state employment in terms of writing your application, figuring out what test you need to do, making sure you meet the qualifications that are outlined in that job posting, writing your letter to the agency. So that's a really great resource. It's based in Sacramento. You could go in person, but they also do digital meetings. And then, yeah, I think one piece of advice I would give is when you're writing the way the state application works is you have to write like what your previous jobs were, and that application is really used. And so really describe what your specific tasks were with examples. I think some people just like write the name of their job and like maybe their title, and it's like that is how we're evaluating who we're going to interview. So really explaining what those job duties are in the application is important, not just in the letter. And then in the letter, I would also say that sometimes it's just people will repeat what we're looking for without actually saying how they have that experience. So that's just another quick tip I could give.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Do any of the other panelists want to chime in or have any thoughts or tips on that application process? For some of you, it might be a while ago, but yeah, curious to hear if there's anything else. I'll pause for that. Oh, go for it, Thomas.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say, when putting together an application, you're really for a job you're really excited about, it doesn't hurt to utilize your mentors if needed to review an application, get some feedback on those questions and how your previous work applies to this position. So it's just a thought.
And you have to take a test to get on the list to be eligible for state jobs. And so it's important to figure out which test you have to take for which position, but it's not really a test. It's rating your experience in different like kind of tasks and different skill sets. So it's just like, how many years of experience do you have in this? How many years of experience do you have in that? So it's not like quizzing you on coastal issues.
And then I'll quickly just add that I think some of your experiences, try to think of them as like transferable skills. Like as a field tech, I was balancing multiple projects and data collection timelines. So I kind of consider those as like project management skills. Maybe you've interacted with undergrad. And so it's kind of being able to communicate your science to like a broader audience. And also your technical writing and demonstrating your writing skills is also really important.
Absolutely. Vanessa, I don't know if you unmuted, so I want to make sure you get a chance if you had anything to add there.
Yeah, just kind of just building upon that, what everyone said, and Sally G mentioned about just those transferable skills. So kind of also having that mindset that you're not starting at zero. Like you do have those skills and then it can be applied like broadly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that reflection. Some tips and tricks. It sounds like it's a little bit, those extra little tests might take a little bit longer, so definitely give yourself enough time to dedicate towards an application for a state position like this. I'll also plug that we have those companion journals on our website that might help you reflect on some of those transferable skills. So highly recommend checking that out. But you have more skills than you think a lot of times. As a grad student, I remember back in the day that I thought, oh, I don't have all these things, but you do have more than you think, just in a slightly different context. I also want to elevate, there was a question that came through, but more so a comment here from Olivia that on going back to the environmental justice, there are some environmental justice trainings that are through the Justice Outside Foundation. There's some rising leaders and workshops and other kinds of workshops or trainings to do. It's a great place to learn also about tribal relationships and consultation in California. The Redbud Resource Group, which I have interacted with as well, has a lot of educational resources. So definitely would recommend those as professional development opportunities. And thank you, Olivia, for sharing those. All right. Let's see. I know we have like maybe 15 minutes or so we might be able to sneak in one or two questions here. But I would love to either hear from the group, and you can choose. We'll go through all four of you. Either to share something that was a favorite thing you got to do, and it sounds like, Evan, we got a little bit of that already from you. A favorite thing that you got to do in your position currently, or a favorite aspect of your job, and or what you find really motivating about your work or the mission of the group. So I will start with Sally.
I think my favorite thing is just like I think it's so interesting that in our positions we get to fund projects. And so I think that's kind of one of my favorite things is being able to see projects come to life and have our input and making it better. And just to involve, like being able to work with a lot of great people and partners on the ground, I think has been a really awesome experience.
Awesome. Let's go with Vanessa next.
So I'd say also on that same thread of working with our partners and specifically also getting to work with like different nonprofits and community-based organizations and get to see like their capacity build. So we may work with varying organizations that may have varying levels of like resources and capacity. And so getting to work with them and providing more assistance, you know, maybe they start off with our funding as like a seed and then they go off and then get more funding. So it's really great to be able to see that growth with our partners along with their projects. And so that's what I would find like most like fun and very impactful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Be part of their success story and see the project grow is also, I'm sure, really motivating. So definitely great answer there. How about Thomas and then Evan?
One of my favorite parts of the job are site visits with tribes for ancestral land return projects or anticipated land return project. And that's a chance to see an area that is culturally and spiritually significant to the tribe, but also understand land conservation through a traditional ecological knowledge like lens framework. So, yeah, those are like really special moments, and I'm excited to see more land return projects throughout our jurisdiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to see that too. All right, Evan.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm going to answer the question by dittoing what Sally said, but then also I thought of something else I wanted to bring up. So I totally agree with Sally. When you work on a project from start to finish, and then you get to go there and see it and experience it as a public user, it's really, really special. And there's one of my like pet projects. I was just on vacation in San Diego for a week, and I went there multiple times, brought my family to the project multiple times, had to scream at my kids to not play in the dunes because that's ruining the project I worked on. But it's just really special, and to see it function and work and people enjoying it feels great. But one thing I did want to mention in terms of like transferable skills is public speaking. Because when I was a research technician, I had an enormous fear of public speaking. And I had a mentor who basically said, well, you have to get over that. Like, this is really important for your career path. And he, even though I had just got out of undergrad, he just had me apply to like every scientific conference I could to give talks for our research, even though he was the PI and, really the one doing the work. He's like, no, you need this experience. And that really helped me progress in my career because I think when you throw yourself into a lot of public speaking, you are forced to really understand the content. People are asking you questions on the fly. It forces you to get really prepared if you don't want to screw up. And then in turn, so that helped me throughout grad school. That helped me afterwards when I was at the Coastal Conservancy, because I feel like early on, it was recognized like, oh, okay, she can represent our agency in this way. And that puts you in kind of a leadership path. So that's another skill set I would recommend people develop.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, and something to practice and continue always practicing, I think. But the more you do it, the less scary it gets, and is what I've heard from everyone and from my own experience as well. So highly recommend that as well. I've also heard of folks taking like improv classes to get comfortable being doing things on the spot. I have not done that, but might be something to try out if you're interested. Push yourself a little bit. Um, Great. Thank you all for answering that one. I wanted to circle back because I remembered that there was something interesting in your background, Evyan, about the consulting world, and wanted to hear your thoughts on kind of the differences between the consulting world, the academic world, and now where you're positioned currently, if there's a difference in pace and kind of like what you learned that you did or didn't like, because I think that's just as important as learning what you like is what you don't like. So yeah, would love to hear a little bit about your journey there and if you had any lessons learned.
Yeah, you know, great, take it with a grain of salt. It was 3 months. I wasn't there very
Fair
long.
enough.
But my experience was that you really had to work to prove yourself and to get the good projects, right? So like you would come in and be working. I was a wetland ecologist, so I got the wetland jobs, but I was getting these really crappy mitigation wetlands underneath freeways and not enjoying the field work. But you had to work your way up in order to get the big restoration projects that the Coastal Conservancy is funding, right? So that was challenging for me. There was a lot of oversight where every email I sent had to be reviewed by my supervisor, which at the Conservancy I was really used to as a Sea Grant fellow, even though I wasn't even technically an employee. I had a fellowship. I had so much autonomy, and I really had support within the agency to talk with partners and do the work. And so that was a shift. And then also work-life balance, really long hours and a lot of deadlines. And you're working for, your clients and they need things by a certain time and you do it. Whereas when in state government, I would say there's a much healthier work-life balance. You very much are expected to show up, do the work, but at the end of the day, you can leave it at work. And I've always really appreciated that. And I think it's really valuable for our mental health. And also the stability. So in academia, it was really nerve-wracking to me trying to get grants. And so, I was planning to get my PhD, but and had my advisor all worked out and the university all worked out, but I didn't want to go without funding. And when I didn't get the grant, I decided to do my Sea Grant fellowship at the Conservancy. And so just thinking of, and I thought back on that experience after my fellowship, like would I want to go back to academia? And it's like that roller coaster of not knowing when if you have funding or not. And so much of your job is dependent on having those grants and then getting tenure and going through the tenure process. It just wasn't really appealing to me.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those reflections as well. I think that is all good points and helpful to hear a little bit about what granted 3 months, but it's still helpful to understand the kind of pace and the kinds of things expected of you in the consulting world. So thank you. I appreciate that. All
I do
right,
want to, sorry,
yeah,
can I
go
add?
for it. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I think I just in my role I also work with a lot of consultants, and so I maybe interact with them in a different way. So I think there are people who actually do really like consulting and really like that fast-paced environment. I think that's could be a really good spot for you. And also we also hire a lot of consultants to do our projects, and so you do get to be involved in some projects, and you want to be doing more applied science or like being the one doing the engineering or designing the coastal system, like that could be also a route that you could take.
That's
And
great.
you make a lot more money.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, they do. That is true. I've seen that. But great perspective on the other side, and definitely that is a good thing to elevate. That it really depends on your personality and what you like and what you don't like. So that's something worth exploring if it's a high pace potentially, or like having some flexibility like that is what you're interested in. So definitely recommend exploring your options. And that's part of what this webinar is, to learn about the different options that are out there. Okay, we are in our last 5 minutes or so we're going to do a lightning last round, and we'll go around the panelists here, the four of you. And I'd love to hear either sort of what you'd wish knowing going into this job, or if there's some sort of advice you would give to your grad school self, on something you didn't expect, or anything really. So take that as you will. Those are your two options. I will start with Thomas.
Yeah, I guess lightning round answers. Don't shy away from networking and relationship building opportunities, especially if you move into the state sector. Networking is very valuable in building relationships as well. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Definitely. Sally next.
I didn't know that this role existed before going into this. So I think the job field is really open and kind of take your time to look into your interests.
Yeah, and thank you all for being here, because this is part of, exploring what jobs are out there. Vanessa.
I would say probably give yourself grace. If you're going transitioning, or if this is the role you're getting into, you don't need to know everything, and you will get to learn at the moment. Just go with it.
Yeah, you'll learn on the job as well, for sure. And then Evyan, finish us out here.
Yeah, I was going to say something really similar to Thomas, to talk to people and to use your graduate advisors network and build upon that. They're there to help you and set the path for you a bit. So definitely talk to their co-PIs and agencies that they work with if you want to do more applied stuff. So yeah, talk to people and partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Do some of those informational interviews. We'll share out the contacts of our amazing panelists today if you're interested to learn a little bit more or have some one-on-one time with them. But I wanted to just say a huge thank you to you all, the four panelists, excuse me, here today. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us. And for those who tuned in, also thank you for your attention and engagement. We're excited to keep these webinars going through the end of the year. You can find information about the series in the website, and here's a link to the registration as well to sign up for upcoming panels. Our next panel will be on August 6th, 12 to 1. We're going to have folks from the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, or BCDC, as you might know it, to share some of their insights. We're going to have this one more summer webinar, but we will be continuing this monthly webinar through the fall and into the beginning of the winter through December. So we hope to see you there. Sign up at that link. Most of the webinars have been recorded so far, but we can't guarantee that. So we really encourage you to attend live. And the last logistical thing to mention, as I said at the beginning, but for folks that joined late, there's going to be a quick 4-question survey. We'd love for you to pop as you leave. That's going to be popped up. We'd love for you to take a moment to fill that out. Should be quick and easy, and it will help us to sort of improve this series and hear from you. So with that, I just, again, a huge thank you to our panelists. We are very appreciative of your time, and for all of you that were watching. I look forward to seeing you next time. All right. See you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.